Hello and welcome to the 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Gilberto for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard army, and I hope that I pronounced your name correctly there, sir. You've sent in some awesome pictures of the 7th Mechanized Division of the 202nd Regiment of Harvest, and I just love it when people put some proper effort into their names. It just, brings the regiment alive. And that blue colour scheme on the tank is combined with that quite impressive urban black and blue colour scheme. You've made me feel rather uncomfortable in the trouser department. I love it. So thanks for these pictures. They look absolutely fantastic. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. And don't worry, if you cannot remember that, there will be links and email addresses down in the description below. But without further ado, let's get on with today's video. So in today's video, guys, I want to do a roundup of all the battles that I have had this week, lessons learned, things that I tried out, and bring that back to you. So it's going to be like a consolidated after action report. I did one of these last week and people seem to really like it. However, I do want to come up with maybe a new name for it. It's going to be a new series I'm going to be launching for the channel. So I was thinking something like Lessons from the Front Lines, or Reports from the Front Lines, or maybe After Action Report is fine. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I'm really open to any name suggestions, for this sort of battle roundup, essentially. So this will cover all the games that I played that I didn't get necessarily a chance to record or battle report, essentially, but I still want to bring that first-hand information, lessons learned, to you guys, the awesome Mordian Glory subscribers and channel viewers. So what were we doing this week? Well, I was fortunate enough to get 3 games of 40k in this week. Yep, really get some serious reps in. Now the weather's been a little bit better, and I've got loads of games planned from the moment that Monday hits and the UK lockdown eases. We're going to be hitting the ground running. So I'm getting loads of games in, and this week I got 3 games in against 2 different opponents, and I used my Scions, my Militant Scions, the Storm Troopers. And let me tell you guys, headline summary of the video, and then we'll get into some more detail, but headline summary, Scions are amazing. They are really good, and dare I say it, genuinely competitive. Okay? Not semi-competitive, genuinely competitive. Okay? They are good. And I'm really, really excited about this. Now, before we get into today's video, let me tell you what we're going to be doing for. Let me explain the format's going to be. I'm going to go through general feelings on Scions, why I think they're really good, go through the list that I used, and then go through the games, summary style, and lessons that we'll learn from those particular games. Okay. So first thing, why do I think Scions are really good? Okay, based on my first-hand experience here, why do I think Scions are really good? Number one, they play the elite game so well. Okay, 9th edition is still, even with Dark Elder floating around, 9th edition is still the game of elite armies. And so having a faction like Scions, which I've always felt has been almost built from the ground up as a faction that's designed to take on elite armies with all their really high AP, decent strength, and decent volume of fire. They've got everything that you need. They're just a little glass hammery. I just think they're really, really good. They play the manoeuvrability game fantastically. They do play very differently to Guard. With my Guard, I often say if I can take 1 of something, I'll take 10 of something, okay? I will spam out. If I can take 1 Limrus, I want 10 Limruses. I want 1 infantry squad, I want 10 infantry squads. That's how the Guard works. We win by redundancy. The Scions, you need to totally reprogram your brain, okay? Totally reprogram your brain for when you want to play your Scions effectively. They need to be a truly well-balanced force, and this is what I have found almost accidentally, just from theory crafting it, putting it into a list, and then taking it into the battlefield, is that you need decent shooting, you need just enough maneuverability but not too much, just enough infantry but not too much, just enough transport and mechanized but not too much, and you absolutely need some kind of screen, but not over the top, and some kind of combat capability. You have to be able to act in every phase as Scions, because you don't have that just level of redundancy and brute force that traditional Guard has. You have to be like the slow blade that penetrates the shield. You have to be that fine dagger weapon. You can't be that bludgeoning sledgehammer. So it's a really exciting way to play. And the best way I would sort of back this up in a summary before we get into specifics, if you guys want, this is kind of like, I don't want to listen any further after this, just 5 minutes all I've got. This is the summary that you guys are looking for, okay? I have often described Scions as Dark Elder on hard mode, or the poor man's Dark Elder, okay? Dark Elder are really powerful right now, and it's a bit like when Marines were really broken at the end of 8th edition. Black Templars were the worst chapter, but being the worst Space Marine chapter still puts you leagues ahead of everyone else. Being the cheap knockoff Drukhari wannabes, being the poor man's Drukhari, still means being a worse version of Drukhari still means you're damn good. Still means you're damn good. And I truly think that Scions are like, I think they're a hidden gem. I think they've got a lot of potential. Okay, so that's the headline, that's the summary. Let's get into the specifics. Firstly, what was my list? Okay, so I tried out three lists. They all had pretty much the same core with some variations. Okay, so I also tried out 2 different regiment traits. I tried out Random Lions in 2 games and Capic Eagles in 1 game. I did this because from my theory hammering, I've identified and just paper, reading the books, reading the weighty tomes and doing my research. I personally believe that on paper the strongest and most competitive regiments for the Scions are Random Lions and Capic Eagles. Now there is a big debate over which one of these is better. I would say they are equal, okay? But Random Lions is much more easy to pilot, Capic, and is a bit more straightforward. Capic Eagles is more of the thinking man's regiment, and you can probably get squeeze a bit more juice out of the orange that is the Capic Eagles, but you're going to have to squeeze that juice out by hand, whereas with the Land of Lions you can just pop it in your automatic juicing machine and you get your orange juice pretty easily. Hopefully this analogy isn't total bullshit and actually makes sense. Anyway, so let's go through the list. So the first list that I used, it was the same core for pretty much every game. Firstly, 12 squads of Scions, 2 battalions, every single squad was a 5-man squad. I ran 8 plasma squads every time. That never changed. 8 plasma squads, and that's double plasma gun and plasma pistol, chainsword on the sergeant. I then, for the other 4 squads, when I was running Capic Eagles, I ran them all with hotshot volley guns. And when I went to my 3rd game where I went back to Land of Lions, I had 2 melter squads. I had 4 melter squads, and then I had 2 plasma squads. I dropped 2 of the plasma squads and actually had 2 bare bones squads. Okay, so it went 6 plasma, 4 melter, 2 bare bones. Okay, that was just in the last game, and I refined things a little bit more. But long story short, 12 Scion squads, lots and lots of plasma with some melter. Okay, now transports, 3 Dakar primes. Okay, all with Gatling gun, all with multi-laser hotshot volley guns. Okay, I then took 2 Valkyries, multi-laser, rocket pods, door gunners, heavy bolters. Okay, they were really good. That was the core of the army. I had the troops and I had the transports. I also took in every game a big block of 9 Bullgryns. I double checked and I double checked again, but please correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I do not believe that Bullgryns take away from your Scion trait. When you look in the greater good, they are allowed. They're a militarum auxilia choice, and you can take them in a Scion detachment without losing your Scion thing, much like in the main codex you can take Ogryns in a main thing without losing your regiment trait. I believe it's the same for Scions as well. So I took 9 Bullgryn, 6 with riot shields with a 2+ save, 4 with the invulnerable saves, all with the big clubs, and I also had a priest in there because I like extra attacks on my big brutes. In terms of characters, I always took 3 Tempestor Primes with Command Rod, Chainsword, and I took a Lord Commissar with Plasma Pistol and Power Sword. I just liked the model. It's the one that most recently painted up, the Commissar that's charging forward with his Power Sword ready to swipe and his Plasma Pistol ready to shoot. I could definitely drop that Plasma Pistol from the Lord Commissar, but actually in pretty much every game, that Lord Commissar did a wound or two with his plasma pistol. So it's actually kind of nice because he hits on 2s with it. It's kind of a nice upgrade just to pop off a shot that hits on 2, strength 7, AP -3, only 1 damage because I never overcharged my Lord Commissar. Now, I also took, in 2 of the games, a Master of the Fleet, an Officer of the Fleet. Okay, because I wanted to give my Valkyries some rerolling 1 stuff and a little source of mortal wounds. In the 3rd game, I dropped some of the plasma guns, and I took a double smite Inquisitor. Okay, and we'll get to what it's a smite and castigation Inquisitor. Okay, pre-game stratagems, and this will all be down the list, guys. Pre-game stratagems. I obviously took 2 detachments, which puts me down to 9 CP. I then took a Progeny of Conflict for an extra Warlord trait. I then took an extra Relic, so that put me down to 7. And then on both Valkyries, I paid for advanced countermeasures, so that even when they were in hover mode, they still had the -1, which put me down to 5 command points. And in the game where I ran the Inquisitor, I had to spend a CP to give him a Inquisitorial Warlord trait, and I gave him the Malleus specific one, which allows him to take additional and cast additional psychic power. So in that last game, I was down to 4 CP starting. But first 2 games, I had 5 CP. Last game, I had 4 CP. So there we go. Now, first 2 games were against the Admech. Tried Land Lions, tried Capic Eagles. My opponent's list, just to be clear, was a good core of Scutari, a good core of the Dakabots. He had some of the Plasma Cataphron Breachers, I believe they are, the ones with the big plasma cannons and the 3+ save. And he had Call, and he had a Tecris Dominus, a Scorpius Disintegrator, a June Crawler, one of the Archaeocopters with all the Daka. I've talked about this list previously, so I won't go into too much detail on it this time. It's a really clever list. I really like it because of even though it looks like an eclectic mix, because of taking 1 of each unit, it allows my opponent access to a huge amount of stratagems, which allows him to get many +1s, +2s and whatnot across his list. Really, really helps him get his droids, his robots that normally be hitting on 4s, he can hit them on 3s, and other units that would normally hit on 3s, hitting on 2s. It's really powerful because he has access to 1 of each unit, and he can basically CP dump 2, 3 turns in a row to give nearly all his heavy hitters some kind of modifier to hit, and they've all nearly got all 4 rerolls thanks to Call and the Dominus. So it's a really well thought out, put together list. I really like it, and I think it's a very clever list. So how did the first 2 games go? So we played the first game. I think all the missions I ended up playing were from the Grand Tournament rulebook, and we ended up playing all of them. I believe had 6 objectives, or 5 or 6 objectives. I know I can't remember what they were off the top of my head now, but 5 objective games. Now, in terms of secondaries, for the first 2 games, I actually kind of struggled. To be honest, with all of the games, I struggled to pick a good third, but I think that was my getting to grips with my list, and I think it was my inexperience with Scions on what to pick for that good third secondary. I took engage no fronts every time, and I took deploy scramblers every single time. Okay, and deploy scramblers is fantastic. You read about people it being an auto take. It is definitely not. It's absolutely fantastic. Engage no fronts. I've pretty much got 10+ points for that every single time as well, because of the Valkyries and the troops that are able to drop in. Okay, for the third objective, I took a mission specific one in 2 of the games, which was I think called Direct Assault, which meant if I held the middle objective, I got 3 points a turn. If I held the middle and my opponent's objective, I got 5 points, and I maxed that out in nearly all. I think I got 12-15 points every single time for that objective because of my board presence, the maneuverability that I was able to have. Now, in terms of how the games went, so the Admech games were really interesting. So we tried it once where I went first, and then we tried it again where I went second, and in both games the Scions were able to win. So the first game, we have plenty of line of sight blocking terrain. You guys have seen the boards that I have used, that that I've been working on when I've been doing my terrain reveals and whatnot. But basically, lots of ruins, very much inspired by WTC boards, big L shapes in the middle, no way to shoot from one side of the board to the other. Really, you know, unless obviously when you've got flyers, and then you can't stop that. So yeah, all the boards and everything was really, really good. Now, in terms of the games themselves, the first game was actually over quite quickly. The Scions got turn 1, and I threw one of the Valkyries straight down the gullet of my opponent, straight into the Howling Dark, and I went straight forward and then used 1 CP precision drop, and I dropped out double melted squad. I should have said, in terms of how the army, where the units were, deployment, Bulgarins always went at the front, Tauruxes went behind the Bulgarins or out of line of sight. Valkyries started at the very, very back of my deployment zone to try and avoid firepower. That worked really well. In terms of who's in what transport, melter squads and a commander and Tempest of Prime in each. Melter squads in each Valkyrie, so 2 melter squads in each Valkyrie, and then Lord Commissar in 1 Valkyrie, and Tempest of Prime in another Valkyrie, and then on the ground with the 3 Torx Primes, where each Torx Prime had 2 plasma squads inside it, and the Tempest Primes started there as well, because one of the Tempest Primes was the Land of Lions one with the 5-up invuln bubble and the reroll 1s bubble. And then I just had 2 squads, whether they had plasma or volley gun or bare bones, no matter what. I had 2 squads in every game that went in the sky. So I actually I did not deep strike a huge amount. I started with a really heavy board presence. I used my Valkyrie's maneuverability to get where I wanted via precision drop. Used my Torx Primes and their 14-inch movement and lancet blocking terrain to hug terrain and get where I wanted to get and get out where I wanted to get out. And then in terms of deep striking, because I didn't want my opponent to scream me out too much, I just took 2 5-man squads, and they were basically used to get scramblers or engage on all fronts. Pretty much that's what their role was, which is why in the last game, because I realised they weren't shooting anything, I dropped the special weapons out of them. Now, in terms of the first game, like I said, first Valkyrie straight down the throat of my opponent, dropped the melter squads out, and I melter gunned the Dakabots, the Castellans or Castellan Dakabots. Between the 2 melter squads, and because they are vehicles, this is the key thing, because they were vehicles, I could use Elimination Protocol Sanctioned, which is the Scientific Order, which allows me full rerolls against vehicles. So I didn't reroll my hits, but I got full rerolls to wound against those Dakabots. Because I was precision drop, I was not in full melter range, not in D6+2, but just in normal melter range, and the supporting fire from the 2 Valkyries, because 1 went down the gullet, 1 went around the flank in hover mode, did a roving gunship manoeuvre. Between those 2 Valkyries and 2 melter squads, I was able to kill 3 out of the 4 Dakabots, and that basically neutered them. Okay, and then I read and I reread and I reread again, so please tell me if I got this wrong, but the precision drop stratagem for the Scions lets you get out 5 inches, but it doesn't say anything about not being able to charge afterwards. The Iotan Dragon one, that's on the other page, says you can't charge afterwards, but the precision drop one doesn't say you can't charge afterwards. So once I dropped out and melted 1 squad, I then charged another and tied them up, and I charged his servitors, which are the big plasma cannons and the tractor treads, because they're not actually that good in combat. So that was what I did turn 1. Something I just shut down so much of my opponent's firepower turn 1. Something I just couldn't have done as regular guard. So one thing I spoke about last week is I was struggling with that turn 1 punch for my regular guard, and how did I want to fix it? With Scions, I did not have that problem. In every turn I was punching and punching hard. So straight away they solved that initial problem that I had with my regular guard. Now, I then used my manoeuvrability from another Valkyrie to drop out onto an objective and hold that with the gunship and the 2 squads and another character supporting them. I was able to hold that objective fairly effectively most of the game. And then essentially, the Bullgrins moved forward. They became a huge distraction card effect. My opponent had to put a lot of firepower into them, but they still connected. They did a huge amount of damage. And the Dorks Primes, because my opponent was having to deal with the Bullgrins that were up in his face, my Dorks Primes basically just gunboated, and they with their manoeuvrability, their 14-inch manoeuvrability and their small profile, they were nipping around buildings and just unleashing Daka shots. And because I'm Landon Lions, everything's AP-1 or AP-3 in terms of the volley guns. So powerful. The Scions were jumping out with plasma guns where I wanted them to jump out. And yeah, it was a really strong showing. And I think by turn 3, essentially the game was sealed. We played it on. By the end of the game, the Scions were ahead on points, and also my opponent, I think, just had left call and a few scattered remnants. So it was a convincing win for the Scions, and I wanted to say fair play and thank you to my opponent Stan, because it was a bit of a drubbing. It was a bit of a difficult game, but he fought on to the end and he kept the chin up, and it was all, he was happy throughout the whole thing. So just big thank you to Sam and a big well done there. So that was the first game. Then we reset. We went again. This time he went first. We just said, look, whatever happens, you go first. We're practicing this out now. Can the Scions, because we thought the Scions did really well because they went first and they were able to deliver that Alpha Strike. What happens when the Scions go second and the Admech get those turns to power up and do some serious damage to the Scions? So I went second on purpose in the second game, and I went as Capic Eagles. I swapped the Melter out for Hot Shot Volley Guns, and so it was a really interesting game. I went second. I lost a Valkyrie. I lost some Ogre in turn 1, and then actually my Ogrin died really quickly because Sam had actually taken a double Smite Inquisitor in this game. We talked about it, and he gave me the idea for my third game to take it. But between his Daka bots unloading into the Bullgrins, but to be fair, his Daka bots went full Destructor mode on my Bullgrim and didn't wipe them out. There was still about, I think, 3.5 or 4.5 left. And it took his Inquisitor to then next turn double smite them and then finish them off with some of the firepower from shooting to do it. But my Bullgrins, again, lesson learned there is they can take such punishment. I've often had this thought about what's better, 9 Bullgrin or 60 conscripts. I'm leaning on the side of the 9 Bullgrin now, guys, because I've had 60 infantry get deleted very easily. I've never had anyone delete 9 Bullgrin in one turn. Never had it. I'm sure Succubus with all the chain flails could do it, but outside of that, I've not had anyone who could do that. So the Bullgrin are just such a key component to this list. Every game they got absolutely battered, but every game they served such a valuable purpose of being this meat wall and this huge distraction card effects, which allowed my Scions to go out there and just snap necks and cash checks. So second game was a bit different, and so by the end of it, Sam actually still had his Daka bots left alive and call, but he'd lost pretty much everything else, but I was very much on the back foot, and I couldn't risk engaging his Daka bots in open warfare. They were very much dictating the flow of the game, but I managed to do enough damage and then win via objectives and using terrain to my advantage, because the Admech struggle with mobility. They've got incredible firepower, but they struggle with mobility, and I used that to my advantage. Now, in terms of comparing, basically the same game, we did the same mission each time, but going first and going second, Scions definitely prefer to go first, but they can still do absolutely fine going second. You just have to make sure you're using the terrain and using your assets as effectively as possible. In terms of the difference between Landon Lions and Capic Eagles, it's a real difficult one. The Landon Lion, having the ability to just get the natural bubble of reroll 1s and then additional order, because the reroll 1s is from your Warlord trait and then you can order on top of that, is so good. Being able to basically overcharge with impunity is so good. Having basic troops and an AP-3 rifle, Plasma AP-4, Melter AP-5 is just so good. It's difficult once you've had a taste of that sweet, sweet London Lion pie, it's difficult to, you know, go somewhere else. So it's but fair play and fair credit to the Cappic Eagles. When I used them, and then for my third game went back to London Lions, I really missed not hitting on twos when I jumped out my transport. I noticed it. Every single time I roll a plasma squad, at least 1-2 pops up there. With my London Lions, I'd often hit sort of 4 out of 5 plasma shots. Sometimes I'd only hit 1 out of 5 because I just kept rolling twos. With my Cappic Eagles, every shot hit. And so the kind of interesting difference is, for the London Lions, you're going to get less shots, but those shots are definitely, you know, less hits. But those hits are going to be more powerful. With the Cappic Eagles, you don't miss. You've basically got army wide hitting on twos, re-rolling ones. You don't miss, but then you've got no re-rolling to wound support, and your Tauroxes don't have any re-rolling to hit support. But yet, yeah, I definitely see the advantage of the Cappic Eagles. Their trait, when used properly, is fantastic. And having 4 squads in my army, all with double hotshot volley gun, jump out in one turn and just hose down my opponent, and literally from tractor robots to Skitarii to even his Castle and Dakar bots, everything getting hosed down, hitting on 2s, rolling 1s, everything felt it. Everything felt it. It was a very intoxicating feeling. It was really nice. But I think those two traits are bang on equal. But I think the London Lion one wins. I think they're both equally powerful. I feel like the London Lions overall win because they're just so much easier to pilot. They always have their ability switched on. It affects all their weapons, from their combat blades to their melter guns. It affects all their weapons. It affects all their vehicles. The Warlord trait is fantastic. It allows you to get more out of your Taurox Primes. Cappic Eagle Warlord trait is also very, very good. But the Relic, having that 24-inch range Voxcaster without needing any Voxcasters, came in handy so many times. So many times. But the London Lions, I think, clinch it just because their Relic is so good for your Taurox. Just banging a fire pin with the same on your Taurox is so good. So good. So I think London Lions and Cappic Eagles are equally as powerful. I think when I'm going to a tournament, I may stick with London Lions just because they're easier to pilot. But I feel like they might be the one that I learn Scions with and get good with Scions with. But then when I get a bit better at tactics and refine my lists a bit more, I'll probably end up switching to Cappic Eagles. I can imagine that's like a natural transition I'm going to make. Yeah, definitely think there's something going on there. Now my third game was a really interesting one. Like I said, caveat, my opponent's first game with 9th. He is generally a very experienced, caveat of the caveat, he is generally a very, very experienced player. Runs a lot of the tournaments that I go to. And again, just a huge thank you to Stu for the game. I'm really impressed by the list. So it was basically 30 Vanguard veterans, all with Storm Shields and Lightning Claws. I mean, straight away, anyone who's got the finger on the competitive pulse knows that shit is good. He then had 5 Blade Guard veterans. He then had 6 Eradicators and 6 Plasma Inceptors. And 26 Vanguard veterans. 6 company veterans with Storm Shield and Lightning Claw as little 2-man objective holding units that you could hide. Really like that tactic. Master Apothecary, Master of Sanctity, and a big old captain on a bike as well. So 2 beat stick characters, an Apothecary, 6 company veterans, 5 Blade Guard veterans, 26 Vanguard veterans, and 6 Eradicators, 6 Inceptors. It had Gravis, it had Blade Guard, it had Vanguard. It was White Scars, so it could advance and charge. It was a good list. Now, interestingly, Stu and I both made a mistake on deployment. I deployed too far forward, totally just forgot he could advance and charge, but then Stu kind of messed up his deployment by, instead of having his Blade Guard veterans in the middle, he had his Blade Guard veterans on a flank, and they actually struggled to get into the game because I could just avoid them, essentially. And he had his Vanguard veterans it wouldn't have made a difference. It wouldn't have made a difference anyway, but he had his Vanguard veterans not at the very front. He had them just behind his jumpy dudes and eradicators because he wanted to try and get his firepower in first. But by and large, didn't make a difference to that. We both basically made our messed up our deployment. If he'd done his Vanguard veterans perfectly, I would have had my Tauroxes further back. So swings and roundabouts, but just an interesting point to make at the beginning. Now, Stu actually went first, but because I had again used terrain to my advantage and deployed my Valkyries as far back as I could, he could only get 4 of his eradicators into range of one of my Valkyries, and my Valkyries might want to hit. So after the dust had settled, my Valkyrie had just taken 6 wounds because it wasn't in proper melter range. So really interesting there. Now, also what happened, I should say, is at the end of turn one, Stu got a turn 1 charge. He put all his plasma inceptors into my Bullgrin and killed so many of them. I think he killed 4 or 5 of them. Then he killed 4 of them. Then the Vanguard Vets went in, turn 1 charge, so he can advance and charge. And he killed me down to 3 Bullgrin, but one of those Bullgrin only had 1 wound, so basically 2 Bullgrin in a wound. In return, the Bullgrin bonked 2 Vanguard veterans on the head. Now, what I did there is I had my Torx Primes again behind the Bullgrins. The Bullgrins were doing a good job. Had my Valkyries doing their thing as per usual. Now, what I did in response against this list was I fell back with the Bullgrins, used one of the Torxes to reform the wall. Got out 4 squads of Scions, but not all of the squads of Scions from the Torxes. I wanted to keep 2 safe. And then between the Dakar Primes and between the overcharged Plasma, even with the Storm Shields, I was able to wipe out that first wave of 10 Vanguard Veterans. So that was really nice. I was also able to, with the Valkyries and the Melter squads, and in this game I had my double Smite Inquisitor with Castigation and Smite, I was able to actually, with one of the Tauroxes and the Melter squads and one of the Valkyries, was able to kill all his Eradicators. Because again, I got out, I precision dropped, and then because I was in Melter range of his Eradicators, every shot that went through, every shot that hit, basically automatically killed an Eradicator, because I hit and then I wound on my 3s, but I got reroll 1s, and then it's AP -5 because of Land and Lions, and it's a minimum of 3 damage, it's D6 plus 2, and so I got 3 Melter shots hit out of the 4 that shot, 3 hit, 3 wounded. That's just 3 Eradicators. 2 overcharged plasma pistols took out another Eradicator, and then my Inquisitor had actually gone a successful smite off and did a maximum of 3 wounds, and got castigation off and did another 3 wounds. Boom, 6 Eradicators done. And then the Valkyries and my other 2 Melter squads that got out, not in Melter range, managed to kill 3 of the plasma jumpy dudes. So in my turn 1, I was like, look, I've dealt with that wave and I've dealt with his firepower. He's still got 3 jumpy dudes left, but I've dealt with his firepower. Right, let's see what happens now. Now I've got the firepower, but this next wave is going to hit. So the next wave of Vanguard's veterans came in. It was another 10 Vanguard veterans, but this time the bike captain and the chaplain came in as well. Now, between their shooting and their charging, they took out one of the Tauroxes. They took out 10 of the Scions, one of which was a 5-man barebone squad that I'd used to do scramblers in my deployments in turn 1. So we took out 10 Scions, Tauroxes, and the remainder of the Bullgrin and the Priest. So that was a big blow. But then I brought one of my Valkyries back round. I brought my Taurox back round. These were the ones that had helped deal with the Gravis Eradicators. So I had Valkyrie in hover mode, which means roving gunship, which means hitting on 3s. I had my Taurox Prime. I still had 2 Taurox Primes, and then I got my other 2 Plasma squads out, which meant that I had 5 plasma squads, 2 Torx primes, a Valkyrie, and my double smite Inquisitor against that block of 10 Vanguard vets and priest, chaplain, and captain. And I killed the chaplain and I killed the Vanguard veterans. So that's 2 waves attacked and 2 waves held off. Now his captain and then his other Vanguard veterans then came along, and his jumpy dudes came along and killed some of the melter guys that had dropped down really deep into his flank and damaged one of the Valkyries. But they were then a bit out of position, but he couldn't have left them because I was threatening his home objective, but they were a bit out of position. That meant that in my turn 2, then his, sorry, that was my turn 2. In his turn 3, like I said, his Vanguard vets went and dealt with that melter cluster, damage on the Valkyries. So both Valkyries were quite badly damaged at this point. I think both Valkyries taken 6 wounds at this point. And then the next sort of wave, that was one wave that came in on the flank. But then that was like, oh, okay, I've dealt with 20 Vanguard veterans. The others are kind of out of position. And it's got some company veterans and Blade Guard veterans which are finally starting to get into the fight, but they're not yet in charge range. Oh, this is kind of interesting. So my turn 3 came around, I was like, okay, I've kind of dealt with these waves, I've taken casualties, but I've dealt with them. Now I can counterattack properly. And so what happened was, the Scions, because I knew I had the firepower advantage, at this point my opponent's basically got no, so we got 3 jumpy dudes. I then kill the rest of those jumpy dudes essentially in that turn, pick off a couple of company veterans, goes to my opponent's turn, he's like, okay, I've got 6 Vanguard vets and some Blade Guard facing like 2/3 of a Scion army. So his Vanguard vets did come in and butchered 5 Scions that I had used to hold a random objective, but that was it. Then my Scions from the Torxes marched over there, overcharged plasma, 3 squads of them, and another melter squad. Killed those Vanguard veterans because they were only a 6-man squad. And that was turn 4. Then turn 5, I killed the Blade Guard, the remaining company veterans, and it was like, okay, there's 1 company veteran left and 1 apothecary left, facing about 40 Scions, 2 damaged Valkyries, and 2 Torx primes. 1 apothecary and 1 company veteran versus that. Now, in terms of points, it was actually really close because my opponent had been dominating the middle of the board and doing really well on objectives. But in terms of points, I believe it was 81 points to the Scions and 72 points to the White Scars. So it was a really close game. It was a really, really close game. And I just think it was... that's the game that I enjoyed. Well, I enjoyed all of them actually, really, really a lot. But that was the game that I felt was a really, really, really sort of strong test and culmination of what I'd learned in the previous 2 games. Because the previous 2 games I was playing a semi-competitive list, piloted very well, but I was still learning my list. And in that last game, I was playing against a really strong list, and I'd used the lessons that I'd learned. So it was really, really interesting. If we were to play it again, when Stu gets some more games under his belt, specifically 9th edition games, because he's played loads of every other edition, I think it could be very different. I think we both would have learned from our mistakes. Some more, I'd be a bit further back with my Scions because now I know I've got the manoeuvrability. But I think that matchup is very... I think that match was not good for the White Scars. And the key thing that I want to mention here, the lesson that I learned here, what has really swung me onto London Lions, is that if I had taken Capic Eagles there, my opponent would basically have been on a 3-up save most of the game. Because he was taking great advantage of cover. Combine that with the Storm Shield, puts him on a 1-up save. My London Lions with my Hotshot Volley Guns, which I took way more of, and with my Hotshot Las Guns, would be putting him onto a 3-up save. But because I was London Lions rather than, Capic Eagles, I don't know if I said it the wrong way around, I don't think Capic Eagles would have been as good. I think London Lions were better because I had the extra AP, which meant every single bullet in my army was, apart from the Torx Primes, Gatling cannons, were were literally putting him on his arse and was putting him on his 4-up invulnerable saves. And Marines with the 4-up invulnerable save aren't that scary. You know, that it kind of negates a huge advantage of the Storm Shield, which is having that 1-up save and cover. And I think that's why Land of Lions, I think, are better, because it basically means no matter what happens, your opponent is always going to be sat on his invulnerable save, or he's not getting a save. Whereas Capic Eagles, it's not a sure thing. Anyway, big long video, but 3 big games, so lots to talk about. Yeah, I'm really excited for my Scions. I'm strongly thinking that they might be my tournament army going forward. They think they really play into the strengths of 9th edition. What I will say is this. I think that Pure Infantry Guard and Scions are equally as competitive as a choice for a Guard player. I think that Guard really play the objectives very, very well with the Pure Infantry, but they do struggle with the firepower. But because you've got so many men, if you have a bad turn or two, or a bad matchup, there's less bad matchups because you've got so many bodies. So I think Pure Infantry Guard is a bit more of a generally take all comers, very strong army, but struggles with damage output sometimes. I think Scions have no issues with damage output. They play 9th edition objectives very well. But I can certainly see there being some matchups for them, like Dark Elder, where they just do not have a chance. They literally do not have a chance. Whereas I think Pure Infantry Guard would have a chance, because I think Pure Infantry Guard can win the wave battle against the Dark Elder. You know, I bloody hope so. That's the whole point of the army, right? But I think that'd be really interesting. And Pure Infantry is much less susceptible to the Dark Lances, much less susceptible to the Raiders. So it would be a very interesting. I think that's why I think they're both equally powerful. And I think what I'm really excited about with Scions is this. Closing statement, Your Honour. I think that Scions provide a viable alternative to Guard players who don't want to go down the Pure Infantry route. There's a lot of Guard players out there where that just Pure Infantry thing doesn't appeal to them financially, time-wise, actually moving the models around. It just doesn't appeal to them. And for those players, I think Scions are certainly a very, very viable route. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying my Scions. I have to say, it was a very fresh experience, and I can see the army being very fun to pilot through many, many games. So I'm trying both. I know my Pure Infantry at the back of my hand, but I'm going to do some more deep diving on these Scions. Anyway, guys, this is a really, really long video. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you have liked what you've seen here today, please consider heading on over to the Patreon page. There will be a link down in the description below. I'm really transparent with the whole Patreon thing. All the money gets reinvested back into the channel. It funds things like going to tournaments. It funds things like doing painting supplies for the Mordian Restoration Project, and the Battle Bunker that we've recently done, that we're going to be getting loads of battle reports in soon. I just use it. I reinvest every penny back into the channel. Of course, huge thank you to all the current Patreon supporters. You guys are fantastic, and honestly, without you, this channel would just be, well, it doesn't bear thinking about. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.